Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today we are going to jump in the Wayback Machine and take a look at some of the earliest cryptid reports in the news. Before we get into this upload, though, a couple links I'd like to share with you. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to those are in the description below. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version, written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny, is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. The links to those books are in the description as well. Now, everyone, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? A wild man in Nevada. Description of him by an eyewitness. He is supposed to be one of the lost men of Freeman's expedition, a characteristic sensation of the plains. Nevada, July 1st, 1870. Correspondence. The people inhabiting the northwestern part of Nevada are at present in an intense state of excitement over the supposed discovery of traces and habitation of a lost or wild white man. Rumor had located it upon a high and densely wooded mountain near the Utah border, and after gathering all of the information that we could, we armed and equipped ourselves for a trip to the location described. About 50 miles from our camp at the sink of Deep Creek, after a tiresome ride of 2 days over the mountains and through one of the wildest and roughest regions of this wild and rough country, we came in sight of and camped near the eastern slope of the mountain. All were now upon the quivy of some sight of the strange inhabitant. We had just picketed our animals and sat by the fire telling strange experiences of frontier life, when we were aroused by a crashing sound caused by the swift approach of some strange-looking body coming toward the camp. Just at this moment, the moon shone through the clouds almost as brilliant as the sun on a noonday. We had a splendid view of the object. It is undoubtedly a white man, about 40 years old, nearly covered by a coat of fine long hair, and in appearance otherwise not at all startling. He carried in his right hand a huge club, and in his left a rabbit, or some other small animal he caught sight of us almost instantly, as the moon shone out, and with a scream like the roar of a lion, and brandishing his club, dashed past the camp and attacked the horses in a perfect frenzy of madness. We at this time could have shot him, but for the surprise of the moment, and ere we were armed, our animals stampeded, and he was after them like the wind down the mountain. We endeavored in vain to send out our dogs after him, which, being savage and well trained, we had counted upon to assist in the capture. But in distended eyes, they sat mutely gazing into the darkness, and neither blow nor kindness could move them to the chase, and the only resource we had was to throw up a hasty rampart of logs, and then station guards to prevent a surprise by the infuriated demon. Occasionally, through the long watches of the night, all hands were aroused by his terrible cries, and thus, in the momentary expectation of an attack, we passed the night. Morning dawned at last, and not one would leave the camp until the rosy sunlight cheered the landscape. When we took the trail of our horses, after having securely hidden our provisions except a lunch for a few days' journey, they had torn down the mountain at terrific speed for about 5 miles. Here they jumped down a sheer precipice about 25 feet disabling my saddle horse. He was lying near the bottom, mangled and in a shocked manner. The wild man had evidently vented his rage upon my disabled horse, as large strips of skin were torn off and thrown to some distance, and his lower jaw was broken. We shot him to end his suffering. The wild man had here given up the pursuit. About 2 miles further down the valley, we found the rest of our stock quietly grazing. The only marks they bore were evidently made by being caught on the trails by the wild man in the chase, entirely stripping some of them of their hair and skin. We now had 6 miles to go to reach our first camp, arriving there at 3 o'clock. When we took lunch, we examined our arms. We started in the direction from which the wild man approached, and were fortunate enough to strike his trail. With a well-defined footprint of the man who would wear a number 9 shoe, but being very broad at the bottom, we followed his trail for about 3 miles. When the gorge opened into a beautiful basin, and half a mile further the trail ended abruptly at the entrance of a cave. We explored the cave, finding a set of soldiers' buttons and a dime dated 1841, which leads me to the conclusion that he is a lost man from Freeman's Company in 1846, or sometime near that time. Now, this was the first article published on the event, although it was not taken from the first publication. A subsequent article that appeared in 2 different papers, the Tribune, New York, and Republican, Michigan, is a rewrite and does not contain as much information. It provides a much more believable account, given what we are seeing here. So, interestingly enough, the original story was from the New York Herald, New York, USA, July 22nd, 1870. A wild man discovered near New Hampton, New York. New York, New York, August 7th, 1870. A wild man has been discovered near New Hampton, Orange County, who is creating quite an excitement in the vicinity. A few days ago, a part of a gentleman were out shooting along with the Big Ditch, a stream which flows through the town, when their attention was attracted by a strange being in a nude state, with long hair and wild appearance, who appeared to be a man who had been running wild for some time, and who probably had been living in the mountains. He was apparently busy in the destruction of frogs and snakes. And when he observed the party, he set up a fierce yell and fled for the woods. A small party gave chase, but was unable to ascertain his whereabouts. He has since been seen by several of the citizens of Dolsontown and manages to keep away at a distance. It is probable that he is an escaped lunatic. This comes from the New York Times, New York, USA, August 7th, 1870. Gorillas seen in California. Stanislaus County, California, September 1870. And an item appeared in the San Joaquin Republican the other day, stating a wild man had been seen in some parts of the San Joaquin County, and we afterward noticed the statement copied into several other papers, with brief comments indicating disbelief in the report. We must confess to a want of credibility on our part, also as the exact correctness of the item at the time, but we were yesterday placed in possession of certain information which leads us to believe that there may be some foundation to the report. As our columns are somewhat crowded this morning, we will give the report as we received them as briefly as possible. F.J. Hildreth and Samuel DeGroot of Washington Corners in this county, while hunting on Horace Timbers Creek in Stanislaus County about 3 weeks ago, discovered footprints along the bank of the creek, resembling the impression of a human being's foot. Mr. Hildreth, who gave us this information, states that the tracks were like those of a human being, with the exception that the impressions of the toes were much larger. Hildreth afterward became separated from his companion, and upon proceeding some distance up the creek, saw a few yards ahead of him what he believed to be gorillas. If the description Mr. Hildreth has given us of these animals is true, he is certainly warranted in believing them to be of that species of animal. Mr. de Groot also reports that he saw the same objects and is positive that they are gorillas. The appearance of these strange animals in that neighborhood is notorious, and that they are gorillas is firmly believed by many great people in the vicinity. A number of old hunters have started out to capture them, and we are promised whatever further facts may occur as soon as the party returns. The above we gathered from various parties, and whether true or not, there are many persons in the neighborhood of Washington Corners who firmly believe that the animals referred to are vertebrate gorillas. This comes to us from The Ledger in California, USA, October 1st, 1870. Wild man seen and eludes capture, Crow Canyon, California, September 1870. We learned from good authority that a wild man has been seen at Crow Canyon near Mount Diablo. Several attempts have been made to capture him, but as yet have proven unsuccessful. His tracks measured 13 inches. This comes to us from the Republican in San Joaquin, California, September 19th, 1870. The Wild Man of the Woods, Rensselaer Park, Michigan, December 20th, 1870. Directly east of Rensselaer Park, in the bosom of the hills, in the deep gorge, down which dashes and leaps the stream which forms an outlet to the lake at Oakwood. Frowning ever this gully is a shelving of rocks known as Table Rock, the whole forming a scene of picturesque and romantic beauty. This gully extends back as far as the former northern bounds of the cemetery, and is just such a spot as would naturally be chosen as a retreat of gnomes and goblins. However, until within a few days, the only attraction about the place was its picturesqueness, but this suddenly became invested with a romance that is exciting enough to warrant our story. A few days since, the schoolboys, who are consistently rambling about the hills, came home breathless and with their hair on ends, and told of a singular appearance of some person whom they had met in the above locality, and whom they described as a wild man. The children were only laughed at for what was supposed to be their credibility, but they were positive in their story, and described the object as frightful in appearance and action. They admitted nothing supernatural, but said he appeared like a crazy man, and was in a semi-nude condition. They didn't take very long look at him, as his appearance they were in something of a hurry to get home. They were not afraid, oh no, but, well, they haven't been on the hill since. Shortly after, their story was sufficiently substantiated by the appearance of the strange men near the old Bacon house under the hill, whereby the most hideous yells and grimaces are frightened, and the occupants nearly out of their senses. They at once reported the facts to the police, two of who repaired to the spot, and after a while succeeded in obtaining sight of the stranger. The police at the time once gave chase, but the pursuit ran like a dog and disappeared, and they were unable to discover his whereabouts at the time. He has since been seen, sometimes in the state of nudity, and other times partially clothed, and with a large knife in his possession. A small fire, supposed to be used by him, has frequently been seen at the point about which he seems to wander. He is undoubtedly a escaped lunatic, whether from the Marshall Infirmary or some private place of confinement. Of course, we are at a loss to determine, as no such escape has been announced. His manner of subsistence has not been discovered, although some declare that they seen places dug up in the earth where he has apparently made his resting spot. Certain it is, he has haunted the locality for a week or more, and it seems very singular that he was neither been captured nor discovered by his friends. The people at Bacon Place have added 2 or 3 male friends to their family, as they were too much frightened by the presence of their mad visitant to remain alone. This comes from Troy Times, Michigan. Also, the Evening Gazette, Iron Mountain, Michigan, December 20th, 1870. A monster in human form, Avondale, New South Wales, Australia, April 17th, 1871. The following peculiars have been supplied to us by Mr. George Osborne of the Illawarra Hotel in Dapto concerning a strange-looking animal which he saw last Monday, and which he believes was a gorilla. It is to be hoped successful means may be adopted to capture the animal, alive if possible, as it is quite evident it is one of the greatest natural curiosities yet found in the colony, together with the interest attached to the peculiar strangeness of the monster in human form. There is something very remarkable and suggestive in the fact that he should have presented himself to Mr. Osborne while that gentleman was going his rounds collecting the census. The following are Mr. Osborne's remark concerning the animal. On my way home from Mr. Matthew Keene's, coming down the range about a half a mile behind Mr. John Graham's residence at Avondale, after sunset, my horse was startled at seeing an animal coming down the tree, and when it got to within about 8 feet off the ground, it lost its grip and fell. My feelings at the moment were anything but happy, but although my horse was restless, I endeavored to get a good glimpse of the animal by following it as it retreated until it disappeared into a gully. It somewhat resembled the shape of a man, according to the following description: height about 5 feet, slender proportioned, arms long, legs like a human being's, only the feet about 18 inches long and shaped like an iguana, with long toes, the muscles of the arms and chest being well developed, the back of the head straight, with the neck and body but the front of or face projected forward, with monkey features. Every particular of the body except the feet and face were covered with black hair, with tan-colored streak from the neck to the abdomen. While looking at me, its eyes and mouth were in motion. After a fashion of a monkey, it walked quadruped fashion, but at every few paces it would turn around and look at me following it, supporting the body with the 2 legs, one arm, while the other was placed across the hip. I also noticed that it had no tail. This comes to us from the Empire, Sydney, Australia, April 17th, 1871. What is it? New York, New York, April 26th, April 1871. As most of our readers are probably aware, there is at present roaming over the United States, and for aught we know, making occasional excursions into British America and Mexico, a singular creature known as the wild man. We have before commented on his behaviors, which are many and various, At regular intervals of time, he appears in different parts of the country, creating always great excitement in the neighborhood, and a vast deal of discussion in the local press, with one exception, which we shall presently mention. Accounts informally agree as to his appearance. He is hirsute, ferocious, swift, and strong, with flaming eyes, and, generally speaking, a horrid and uninviting aspect. The few rash mortals who have approached him near enough for conversation say that he speaks of uncouth and unintelligible gibberish. So far, the received descriptions of him are unanimous. The apparent discrepancy with regard to his stature, which varies in different narratives from about 4 feet to 10 feet, is easily accounted for by the mental agitation under which these observations of his person must necessarily be made. Or he may have the power said to be possessed by Mr. Home of extending and contracting himself at will. This would not be so strange as the faculty which gives us rise to the exception above referred to, of changing his sex, so that after horrifying Alabama as a wild woman, he will immediately plunge Oregon as a wild man. His seemingly behavior is otherwise perplexed attribute of his strange being, superior at time and space. He thinks nothing of being seen simultaneously at points hundreds of miles apart. Quite extraordinary is his peculiar power of eluding capture. Usually all the able-bodied inhabitants of the district turn out in mass to hunt with guns and dogs, but we have never heard of this being taken. After keeping up with this game of hide-and-seek in one locality for a few days, he departs for another, with the same result. In all his wanderings, however, it is observed that he keeps aloof from the settlements, confining himself, for the most part, to the border of civilization, where contact with nature keeps the imagination fresh and vivid, undulled by the realities of city life. After flitting about the continent in his manner for a while, he suddenly vanished into obscurity, where he rests quiet, perhaps for months. Then he reappears, and the program is renowned as before. We have been led to return to this subject by the recent appearance at once of the real and a bogus wild man in Tennessee and Michigan, respectively. All great natural curiosities are with us, sure to be counterfeited sooner or later. The Cardiff giant, it will be remembered, was so intimidated, and Boss Tweed and Mr. Fisk have been multiplied into countless copies of rascality. This Michigan monster is, in some respects, credible, and shows ingenious of its inventors. Its appearance is well calculated to deceive. To begin with, it is fearful deformed, a sufficient obvious trick, but still effective. Then its hands are covered with long coarse hair, face grown full of rank whiskers, while its eyes look like those of a wolf. These details, it must be admitted, show skillful handling, and only a practiced eye could detect the deception. But the one infallible test of the true wild man is here, wanting his defiance of pursuit. If his more than mortal speed falls to outstrip his would-be captors, he either subsides into the ground or simply exhales into the air before their wandering eyes. So after hearing that the Michigan prodigy was caught by the paltry and commonplace device of hunting him out of the swamp with 2 dogs. We are unprepared to learn that he is merely a wretched lunatic. And it is, on the whole, not surprising that the excitement person who caught him should have vented their natural disappointment by chaining him up into an outhouse and permitting the dogs and boys of the neighborhood to worry him. It must be not only admirable sport, but adapted to make him as near a copy of the genuine wild man as near desired. The Tennessee report, on the other hand, bears all the evidence of authenticity. This wild man, according to the Jackson Whig, gives the impression of a strange and frightful being, which, in itself almost conclusive, he is said to be 7 feet high and possessed great muscular power. Conviction deepens as we proceed. His eyes are unusually large and fiery red. His hair hangs in tangled and matted mess of jet below his waist, and his beard reaches below the middle. What skeptic desires more? Yet this is not all. His entire body is covered in hair, and his aspect is most frightful. He shuns the sight of man, but approaches with wild and horrid screams of delight every woman who is unaccompanied by her man. He sometimes, with great caution, approaches houses, and, should he see a man, he runs away with astonishing swiftness, leaping the tallest fences with ease of a deer, defying alike the portrait of men and dogs. He has frightened several women by attempting to carry them off as well as by his horrid aspect, and the whole country around Sabi is in. The citizens are now scouring the woods, and are determined either to capture or drive off this monster. Of course, we know that the determination of the citizens will be in vain, and that the monster will be neither captured nor driven off until it suits his wish. But in the meantime, while the good people of Sabi fruitively scour their woods, would it not be well for naturalists to investigate the interesting wonder? Perhaps the wild man is a remnant of those unknown prehistoric races who once ruled the continent. For the memory of man can scarcely recall a period when he was not, or may he not be. We offered a suggestion without difference. May he not be that lost link for which Mr. Darwin is looking. In any event, we have had enough of the wild man, and he ought at once to be either investigated or suppressed. New York Times, April 26, 1871. Another wild man in Tennessee. Loren County, Ohio, May 10, 1871. Tennessee has another wild man, much more satisfactory than the last. He is 7 feet high, covered with shaggy hair, very muscular, runs away from men with astonishing swiftness, but approaches unprotected women with wild and horrid screams of delight. Independent Democrat, Ohio, May 10th, 1871. Wow, I am literally burning up and my throat is sore as heck. But I took a little nap after I put the first upload out today, and I don't even know if I'm going to get this out today. But anyway, who knows? I definitely am not feeling any better. My friggin' head is killing me. I've got a wicked fever. Legs hurt. I can't taste my tea, and I'm pissed off, and this sucks. Back to the upload now. Sorry. One thing that I almost kind of slammed in an interjection on was that how either stupid the news media was back then to not think there was more than one, because in one article it said, how can how can he possess this power to be in one state and then run over here and shape change into a female and then go be seen in Utah? So the news media is either stupid at that point, or they were used by the government as of right now, like the government uses our news media. And it's in every country. I mean, we've covered a couple different countries in the last 5 days. So I think that each government or whatever uses the news articles to frighten their citizens and kind of keep them in check. I don't know. Just, my opinion or whatever. Have a great day, guys, and hopefully I feel better tomorrow. See you later.